Hello and welcome back to this Cosmic Acad. In this video, we are going to see struct. What is a struct in Golang? Alright. So a struct in Go is like a blueprint for creating objects that represent real world things. Think of it this way. A student ID card contains several pieces of information about a student, right? Like their name, age, roll number and grades. Similarly, a struct groups related piece of data into a single unit, right? So that we can say, okay, all this data relates to a specific struct, relate to a specific student, and of course, in this case, a student is going to be a struct. And this is the actual way of defining a custom data type in Golang. All right. So why we need struct in Golang? So in real life, if we want to describe a student, we would not just say name John, or let's say age is going to be 20, or we are going to describe a student by its ID card, right? And all those related information will be present on the student ID card, right? We cannot say separately like name is John, age is 20, like that we cannot keep that, right? And what if we have n number of property over there, n number of data over there which relates to a specific student, right? We cannot do that one by one, correct? So what we can do is, instead of doing it in a single way, we can say, okay, let's collect all this information at once and wrap it inside a struct, okay, so that this group data, this related data will be wrapped in a struct, and you can use this struct for a specific student. Got it? So a struct always allow you to organize the group data in a Golang programming, right? So let's see how can we define a struct, and we know that this is the actually way to define a custom data type in Golang. So let's do that quickly here. So I will say I want to use a struct. How can I do that? How can I define a struct? So for that, Golang says you need to use type keyword. So use this keyword type, and then you need to provide the struct name, and make sure a struct name is always going to be starting in a camel case, and not camel case but the Pascal case. And why is that so? Because Golang is a case sensitive. That means if you are defining a variable with small casing, right, that variable won't be accessible outside of a package. And what is package? Actually, we will learn package in a separate video, but for now just remember to use Pascal casing in Golang. So I will say type, and then I will go and type a student over here. That is going to be the name of the struct, right? And then Golang says you need to say specifically to me, okay, this is a struct. So how can you say that? So we have a struct keyword as well there. So I can use this struct keyword, and then we are done creating this struct. And this struct is nothing but, in other words, is, if we will say, this is a custom data type which we are defining over here, right? We saw the data type as integer, string, float. And if you guys didn't saw that video, I will paste that link in this video so that you can go back and see what is data type. So now we created custom data type here, and then we know that this struct will group the related data. And in this case, of course, we have to group all those student data, specific student data. So for that we can say, okay, this student will have a name. This student may have name. Of course, name will be there. So I'll say, okay, name, and then the data type. So this data is going to be type of a string. Name is going to be a string type, right? So next I'm going to say not ID. This time it should be name, and then we should have ID as well of a student, right? So I'll say ID is going to be integer, of type integer, and then I can say, okay, we have name, ID, then what else we can have? We can have age as well. So age is also going to be integer. So I'll say integer, and then let's say I will put roll number as well. So I'll say roll number, and this roll number should also be of type integer, right? But then we have grade also over there, so I'll say grade, and this time it should be a string. So I'll say string. You can make, if you want to make it integer, you can make it. Of course, it completely depends on you and the required functionality. But just to understand it properly, I'm just going to take this data, and then we can say, okay, we have grouped all those data which exist on a student, which a student can have, right? A student can have ID, name, age, roll number, and grade. That is what exactly printed on the student ID card, right? So now we have a custom type as a student. We have a struct as a student, name student. We should be able to, since we know that this is a struct, this is a custom type, we should be able to create a data of this type. We should be able to create a container of this type, and then if this is a container, we know that if this is a container, we can actually put the value inside that container. We can put actually the content inside that container, right? So let's make this variable student, and this time I'm going to say, okay, create a struct of type student. And this is how we are going to create a struct. Previously we saw that we can use, let's say if we are going to make a variable, so we are just saying, okay, variable, so this is going to be of type string, right? This is how we are defining the variable of type string or integer or any other data type which we saw, which exists in golang. But in case of struct, when we are defining a struct by ourselves, custom data type, in that case we need to say, okay, this is going to be struct student. And if you want to initialize the default value to this struct, specific struct, you can just put a curly braces over there and you are done. Now you can provide all this information here, so that by default you will be having all those values for this student1, let's say. All right, we can have n number of students, so all those students is nothing but a type of a student, which is of course struct in this case, right? So what I will be doing here is, let's say I will use ID, and then we need to assign the value. So I'll say 1, student1 will be having ID 1, and you can provide any value you want, but this time I'm going to use 1. So what else we have? We have name over there as well, so we can say name. So this time I'm going to say, okay, student1, let's say, and then next what I'm going to say is age will also be there. So age, let's say 10, and then I'm going to say roll number as well. So roll number should also be there, since we have defined over there and that is actually required. So I'll say roll number as 1, and then we have grade also over there. So I'll say is studying in grade, let's say I'll say grade 1. Cool. So now we have a student data over there. You can, if you will hover on this, you can see the type of data type of this student1. It is of type student, and this is how exactly we are going to define struct and the custom data type, of course. So since we have this data ready, we should be able to see this data. Let's use println, and I will just put student1. Let me just save it and run this code. It should work in the expected way. We can see here we have 1 student, 1 10, 1 grade 1. So what does this actually means? This is nothing but a student data, all right, which we have provided here. But then if we have this student data, we should be able to see all those data, right, of a specific student. How can we do that? So for that we just need to use dot and then call the specific property name. This is nothing but a property of a student, right? If you are a student, you have a property name, you have a property ID, all right? So I will say, okay, this time I just want the student name, so I'll say student1 dot name, and let me just save it, see if that works. Now we can see we have the name of the student. That means we should be able to access this student information using dot and then the property name, all right? So we know that now we are able to access this. Now next what we are going to do is, if we are able to access this property of this specific student, it can be of type any, not a student, but let's say tomorrow you are going to define a new struct and the name can be anything. So using this dot and then the property name, you should be able to access the variable which you have defined on that specific struct, right? So now I will say okay, student 1 dot, and I want to change the grade. Now this student is actually passed grade 1 and now he's going to be in grade 2. So I'll say student 1 dot grade, and this time it is going to be grade 2. So I'll say grade 2. And how can we verify that if it is working fine? Let me just console this after modifying the grade, and we should be able to see the updated data. So let's run this once more and compare both the response, how it is coming. So we can see here previously it was grade 1 and now it is coming 2. That means we have modified those variables, right? We have modified those properties which exist on a student object. So similar way we can, this is just one example, similar way we can create n number of struct, and those structs can have all those related information. All right, and this of course data can be of any type. All right, so now next what we can do is let's do one more thing. We'll see one more student over there. So I'll say okay, student 2, and this student 2 will have, let's say, id as 2, name is going to be student 2, and age let's say 11, and the roll number let's say 10, grade is going to be 3. Let me just save this and print this information of a student 2 as well. So where should I print this? Okay, let me just print it here, and here I will say print the information of a student 2. Let me just save this and run this program. We should be able to get the student 2 information as well, and the same way we should be able to access and modify the information present inside this specific student. All right, we can say here this is the information of student 2. Similarly, we can have n number of student, and we should be able to access all those properties, and we should be able to modify that as well, right? So this is what struct is, and if you guys are having any difficulties, please let me know in the comment section. I will try to address all those as early as possible, and we'll meet you in the next video. Thank you guys.